You ever just look up, see plane way up there and think, wow, they make it look so easy.
Yeah, peaceful.
Effortless, right?
Yeah,
I bet I could do that.
yeah.
But then you remember it's a lot more going on up there than just pointing the nose up and going.
Right. It is definitely more complicated than it looks from the ground.
So today we are diving into the FAA's Airplane Flying Handbook.
This is it.
This is like the go-to guide for anyone who wants to learn to fly
The Bible.
for new pilots.
And it spends a lot of time talking about this idea of airmanship,
Right.
which is more than just knowing how to fly the plane. It's like this deeper understanding and judgment and skill that you need to apply that knowledge safely and effectively.
It is. It's the art of flying.
That's a good way to put it. It's kind of like, I'm thinking like driving a car.
Yeah.
You know how to drive a car, but do you really understand how to navigate this complex road system in all kinds of conditions?
Absolutely. And that's a great comparison. But the handbook actually says right from the start that comparing flying to driving can be a little bit misleading. Oh, interesting. So what makes it so different? Like, what are the key differences that make this airmanship so important?
Well, when you're driving a car, you're basically limited to two dimensions, forward, backward, left, right. But when you're in an airplane, you've got that third dimension, altitude,
Oh, that's true.
and you've got all these other things to think about like weather and wind. It's not just about staying between the lines anymore.
So you can't just use your instincts from driving to get you through.
I got to think in 3D.
Yeah. Okay, so that makes sense, but it goes even deeper than that. The handbook outlines 4 specific abilities that are essential for developing that true airmanship. And it's like a secret society. We've got coordination, timing, control touch, and speed sense.
It sounds a little intimidating when you put it like that, but really it's about honing those skills that separate a good pilot from, someone who just meets the bare minimum requirements.
So let's break those down, starting with coordination. What does that mean in the context of flying?
Well, think about it. You've got all these controls you have to operate. The yoke, the rudder pedals, the throttle, and they all have to work together smoothly and seamlessly. It's like a concert pianist effortlessly playing a complex piece of music. Each finger hitting the keys with precision and grace.
So it's all about that smooth operation of the controls, making sure everything is working together in harmony.
And no jerky movements.
And timing, that must play a huge role too.
Oh, absolutely. Timing is crucial. Think about a surfer anticipating the next wave, paddling at just the right moment to catch it.
Yeah.
That's timing in flying. Applying those control inputs we talked about at precisely the right moment. Too early or too late, you could end up in a sticky situation.
Right. Every action has to be timed perfectly.
Yeah.
Okay, what about control touch? This one sounds kind of mystical to me. Like, what is that exactly?
Yeah, it does sound a little bit like a Jedi sensing the Force.
Yeah.
But it's really about developing an intuitive feel for how the aircraft is responding to what you're doing. Like a tightrope walker sensing the slightest shift in the rope's tension with their feet.
Okay.
That's kind of what control touch is like. It's that subtle feedback you get through the yoke and the rudder pedals. It tells you exactly what the airplane is doing, how it's reacting to your commands. And that's what allows you to make those smooth, precise adjustments, even in turbulent conditions.
So it's that connection, that feeling of being in tune with the plane.
Yeah, you become one with the machine.
All right, and last but not least, we've got speed sense. Is that more than just looking at the airspeed indicator?
It is. It's more than just seeing a number. It's about developing an instinct for how the airplane behaves at different speeds. Think about a race car driver, right?
Okay.
They can sense when they're pushing the car to its limit, when they need to ease off.
Right.
Same with flying. You start to recognize the subtle cues, the changes in sound, the way the airplane feels in your hands. You know if you're getting close to a critical speed, if you need to adjust your power.
So you develop an intuition for how the plane feels at different speeds?
Right, an internal speedometer.
Okay, so we've got these 4 abilities that make up the foundation of airmanship. But what about the mental side of things? Like, what qualities set an accomplished pilot apart beyond just having those technical skills?
Yeah, it's not just about stick and rudder skills. The handbook really digs into the mental aspects of flying.
Yeah.
Things like critical thinking and judgment.
Okay, so what specific qualities are they talking about?
Well, one of the most important ones is situational awareness. Being able to quickly and accurately assess a situation. It's kind of like a detective piecing together clues at a crime scene.
Okay.
A good pilot takes in information from multiple sources, instruments, visual cues, weather reports, all of it. And they have to process that information really quickly to get a clear picture of what's going on.
Okay, so it's like having this mental checklist running in the background all the time, constantly evaluating and reevaluating the situation.
Yeah, always staying ahead of the airplane.
Right. And that leads to another important quality,
Right.
anticipation.
Exactly. Being able to predict what's going to happen next. A good pilot doesn't just react to what's happening right now. They're thinking several steps ahead, considering the potential consequences of their actions, how the situation might change. It's like playing chess, always thinking about your opponent's next move.
That's a good analogy.
Yeah.
But aviation has so many variables, right? The weather, the traffic, equipment can fail. How can a pilot possibly anticipate everything that might happen?
Well, you can't anticipate every single thing, of course.
Right.
But what you can do is develop this mindset of constant risk assessment and mitigation. And this is where airmanship comes in.
Okay, so can you give me an example? Like, what does that look like in practice?
Sure, let's say you're planning a flight, and the weather forecast shows some potential for turbulence along your route. Now, a pilot who's just focused on the bare minimum might say, well, the weather's good enough to fly, let's go. But a pilot with strong airmanship is going to dig a little deeper, consider the type of aircraft, their experience level, their personal comfort level with turbulence, things like that.
Okay, so they might decide to take a different route, maybe delay the flight, or even cancel it altogether if the risks are too high, even if technically they could make the trip.
Exactly. It's about making informed decisions that prioritize safety above all else.
Yeah.
That's the proactive mindset that sets truly accomplished pilots apart.
Right. It's about thinking ahead and being prepared for the unexpected.
Always be thinking, what if?
So we've talked about the specific abilities, the mental qualities that make up airmanship. But the handbook also emphasizes that flight training isn't just about learning to fly one specific plane. It's about building this foundation that can be applied to any aircraft.
Yeah, that's crucial. It's not about memorizing a bunch of procedures for a particular airplane. It's about understanding the underlying principles of flight, aerodynamics, aircraft systems. Those apply to every aircraft. It's kind of like learning a language. Once you grasp the grammar and vocabulary, you can communicate in all sorts of situations. You don't need to know every single word.
Right. So even if you start your training in a basic single-engine airplane, the goal is to develop those skills and that judgment that will allow you to transition to more complex aircraft down the line.
Exactly. Build that solid foundation, develop good habits, and a deep respect for what it takes to fly safely. And of course, to make sure everyone's on the same page when it comes to safety and training, there's this whole regulatory framework in place overseen by the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration.
Right. The FAA, they're like the guardians of the skies, right? They set the rules and standards to keep things safe and organized up there.
That's a good way to put it. And one of their main tools for doing that is the Code of Federal Regulations, or 14 CFR.
14 CFR. Yeah, that sounds a little intimidating. It's a massive document, right?
It is. You can think of it as a giant encyclopedia for aviation rules and regulations.
Right.
And it's all there to promote safety and make sure everyone's operating to the same standards.
But it's broken down into different sections, right?
It is. It's organized into subchapters and parts, each dealing with a specific area of aviation.
Okay. And I'm assuming the handbook focuses on the parts that are most relevant to new pilots and their training.
Right. There's a few key ones you'll see mentioned throughout the handbook.
Which ones are those?
Well, you've got Part 21, for example, and that one deals with the certification of aircraft and aircraft components.
Okay.
It lays out the whole process for manufacturers to obtain type certificates.
What's a type certificate?
It's basically the FAA's stamp of approval for a particular aircraft design.
Oh, okay.
And that ensures that the airplane meets all these rigorous safety and performance standards.
Got it. So it's like a guarantee that the plane has been designed and built to a certain level of quality and safety.
Exactly. And then, once the airplane is built according to the design, it needs an airworthiness certificate.
Oh, right. I've seen that. It's like a little placard in the cockpit.
Yep, that's it.
Yeah.
And that confirms that the aircraft meets the requirements of its type certificate and is safe to fly.
So it's like the airplane's driver's license.
That's a good way to think about it.
Okay. But what happens if, a safety issue is discovered after an airplane has already been certified and it's out there flying?
That's where Part 39 comes in.
Okay.
It covers airworthiness directives, or ADs. You can think of these as safety bulletins or even recalls for airplanes.
Okay.
So if a potential safety concern is identified with a particular aircraft type, the FAA will issue an AD. And that mandates specific inspections, repairs, or modifications.
So it's like a way to keep those planes safe, even after they've been certified, even if new information about potential risks comes up.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. What other parts of 14 CFR are important for new pilots to know about?
Well, there's Part 43,
Okay.
and that covers the maintenance and alteration of aircraft.
Oh, right. So making sure the work done on those planes is done to the highest standards?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And of course, there's Part 91, which is a big one.
Okay.
It covers a wide range of operational rules, everything from general flight rules to equipment requirements,
Oh,
maintenance records, and even rules for specific types of operations. It's basically the pilot's rule book,
so if it's about flying a plane, it's probably in Part 91.
pretty much. Yeah.
Okay. And speaking of rules, the handbook also talks about the Airplane Flight Manual, or AFM, and the Pilot's Operating Handbook, or POH.
Right.
It's like the owner's manual for the aircraft.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
What kind of information is in there?
It's got all sorts of crucial information about the airplane, details about its systems, its limitations, emergency procedures, performance data.
Wow, it's like a comprehensive guide to the airplane.
It is.
And there's a whole section dedicated to the equipment list, right? What is that exactly?
The equipment list basically outlines all the equipment that's required for the airplane to be considered airworthy.
Okay.
And it's developed during the certification process, so it's tied to that airworthiness certificate we talked about.
Interesting. So it's not just a random list of equipment, it's specifically chosen to ensure the airplane is safe to fly.
Exactly, yeah.
And you'll find a figure in the handbook that shows examples of the different categories of equipment, from the basic instruments to the navigation and communication systems. It's amazing to see how all these pieces work together to keep the airplane safe and functional.
Yeah, it all comes together.
Okay, so we've got the FAA setting the rules and standards, the airworthiness certificate, the AFM and POH, but who's actually making sure all this happens on the ground? Who are the people responsible for implementing these regulations?
Well, that's where the Flight Standards Service, or FS, steps in.
Okay.
They're the ones who translate those FAA regulations into actionable standards. And their main point of contact for most of us in general aviation is the Flight Standards District Office, or FSDO.
The FSDO, right.
Yeah.
So that's like the local branch of the FAA.
Pretty much, yeah.
What do they actually do?
They handle a lot of different responsibilities. They certify pilots in flight schools, they conduct surveillance of aircraft operations, they investigate accidents.
Oh, wow. So they're the ones who come out to the airport, make sure everything's running smoothly.
Yeah, they're the ones on the front lines, you could say.
Okay. And they're staffed with aviation safety inspectors, or ASIs, right?
Right, the ASIs, those are the folks who are out there making sure everyone is following the rules.
And they're usually the ones who give the practical tests for pilot certificates, right? Although I know there are also designated pilot examiners, or DPEs. What's the difference?
Yeah, it can be a little confusing. Basically, ASIs are full-time FAA employees, and they're responsible for a wide range of things. DPEs, on the other hand, are private citizens who are authorized by the FAA to conduct practical tests.
Okay, so it's like they're helping to meet the demand for testing services?
Exactly. There are a lot of people who want to get their pilot certificates, so DPEs help to alleviate some of the workload for the ASIs.
Okay. But even though they're not FAA employees, they still have to operate under the same standards, right?
Absolutely, yeah. They operate under the supervision of the FSDO,
Right.
so everything is done according to the same procedures.
Okay, so it sounds like a pretty well-coordinated system, all designed to ensure a high level of safety and professionalism.
It is, yeah. But even with all the regulations and oversight, the handbook is very clear that the true cornerstone of aviation safety is the flight instructor.
Makes sense. They're the ones on the front lines, shaping the next generation of pilots, instilling those all-important skills and that mindset from day one. But what exactly makes a good flight instructor? What should someone be looking for when they're choosing an instructor?
Well, it goes beyond just technical expertise, being able to explain things clearly.
Right.
The best instructors are patient, they're encouraging, they're adaptable to different learning styles. They create a safe and supportive environment where students feel comfortable asking questions,
Right.
admitting mistakes, pushing their limits without feeling judged.
So it's about finding that mentor who not only teaches you the how-tos, but also helps you develop that right mindset, that airmanship we've been talking about.
Exactly. They guide you along the path.
And with such a huge responsibility, the pressure must be immense for flight instructors.
Oh, it is. They play a crucial role in aviation safety. And that's why the FAA has very rigorous requirements for them.
Right. It's not just about knowing how to fly. It's about knowing how to teach, how to inspire, how to instill those good habits and that passion for aviation while upholding the highest safety standards.
It's a delicate balance.
It is. And that brings us to the syllabus, which the handbook really emphasizes as a key tool for structuring the learning process. How does a good syllabus help?
Well, think of the syllabus as a roadmap.
Okay.
It guides both the instructor and the student through each stage of training,
Yep.
making sure they build their knowledge and skills in a logical, systematic way.
So it's not just a random collection of lessons. It's a carefully planned sequence designed to challenge the student, but also ensure they're mastering each step.
Exactly. And a good syllabus incorporates a variety of teaching methods.
Okay.
Ground instruction, flight simulations, dual flights with the instructor, and eventually solo flights.
Right. So it's a mix of theory and practice all working together to build that solid foundation.
Yeah, it's all connected.
And for those who are seeking out the best of the best, the top tier instructors, the handbook mentions two distinctions: the Gold Seal Flight Instructor Certificate and participation in the FAA Wings program. Can you explain what those are?
Sure. The Gold Seal Flight Instructor Certificate, that's a mark of excellence. It's awarded to instructors who consistently maintain high standards of instruction and professionalism.
Oh, wow. So that's like a gold star for flight instructors.
It is, yeah.
And the FAA Wings program, we touched on that earlier, but it's about encouraging ongoing learning, right?
Right. It's a voluntary program for pilots of all levels, and it helps them stay current on their knowledge and skills, promotes a culture of continuous improvement in aviation.
So finding an instructor with that gold seal or one who participates in the Wings program is a good sign that they're committed to staying at the forefront of their field.
Absolutely, yeah. It shows they're dedicated to their craft.
All right. Well, this has been a fascinating look at the world of airmanship and flight training. It's clear that it takes a lot more than just knowing how to operate an airplane to be a truly competent and safe pilot.
Yeah, it's about developing that deeper understanding, that judgment, that airmanship that separates the good pilots from the great ones.
Exactly. And it all starts with a solid foundation, a good instructor, and a commitment to lifelong learning.
That's the key. Never stop learning in aviation.
We'll be right back after a quick break to continue our deep dive into airmanship and flight training.
Stay tuned.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the world of airmanship and flight training. Before we move on, I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier about the FAA Wings program.
Yeah.
You said it's a way for pilots to keep learning and stay sharp even after they've, earned their wings.
Right.
Can you tell me more about why that's so important?
Sure. It's easy to think that once you've got your pilot certificate, you're done.
Right.
You've made it, you can fly.
Yeah.
But aviation is constantly evolving.
Yeah.
There are always new technologies, new procedures, new challenges.
Yeah, right.
And the Wings program recognizes that, being a safe and proficient pilot, it's not a one-time thing.
Right.
It's a lifelong pursuit.
So it's about fostering this mindset of always learning and always improving, even for experienced pilots.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
Staying ahead of the curve, refreshing your knowledge, refining your skills. Complacency, that's a dangerous thing in aviation.
Yeah, it's like I'm thinking of a doctor.
Yeah.
They don't just stop learning after medical school.
Right.
They have continuing education courses to keep up on the latest advancements.
Absolutely. You want your doctor to be up to date, right?
Exactly. You don't want them using outdated methods.
Same with pilots.
Yeah.
You got to keep learning. And the Wings program provides a really structured way to do that.
Right. So it's not just about checking a box to say you've met the requirements.
Right.
It's about that deeper commitment to excellence.
Yeah, and to safety.
Okay, that makes sense. So let's get back to the handbook and its focus on building those core airmanship skills: coordination, timing, control touch, and speed sense.
Right, from day one.
Right. We talked about those in theory, but how do they actually translate into practice during flight training? Like, paint a picture for me.
Okay, sure. Imagine those early training flights.
Okay.
Practicing basic maneuvers like turns, climbs, descents. Now, these might seem simple,
Yeah.
almost boring, but they're the foundation.
Oh.
Everything else builds on that.
Right. So it's like learning your scales on a piano,
Yeah, exactly.
or you can play a concerto.
You gotta master the fundamentals first.
Right.
And each of those maneuvers, they require precise coordination of the controls. Yoke, rudder pedals, throttle, all working together.
And timing must be crucial, too.
Oh, yeah, crucial. You can't just react. You got to anticipate how the airplane's going to respond.
Right.
Make those inputs at just the right moment.
So a slight delay, slight hesitation could throw things off.
Yeah.
Exactly. A little too much rudder, a little too little aileron, and you're not going to be where you want to be.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
What about control touch? How do you develop that sense, that feel for the airplane during training?
It's all about paying attention to the feedback you're getting from the controls, the
Exactly.
pressure on the yoke, the resistance in the rudder pedals. A good instructor is going to really emphasize that, feeling those subtle cues,
Hmm.
anticipating how the airplane's going to respond,
Right.
making smooth, precise adjustments.
So it's not just about moving the controls, it's about listening to what the airplane is telling you through those controls.
That's a good way to put it, yeah.
Okay, and speed sense. How do you develop that during those early training flights?
Well, it's not just about looking at the airspeed indicator, reading the number.
Right.
It's about learning to recognize how the airplane feels at different speeds, how it sounds, how it
What?
responds to the controls,
Yeah.
how it moves through the air.
So it's that internal feeling, that intuition for how fast you're going. Yeah, an internal gauge, like you said before.
Okay, and the handbook emphasizes the importance of training in, those basic training type airplanes.
Yeah, those are great for learning.
Why is that so important? Why not just start with something more sophisticated?
Well, it might seem counterintuitive, but those simpler airplanes, they actually provide a clearer connection between what the pilot does and how the airplane responds.
Mm,
They're less complex,
okay.
more forgiving, so students can make little mistakes
Okay.
without, any serious consequences.
Right, so you can focus on the fundamentals, those core skills, without being overwhelmed by a bunch of complex systems.
Exactly. It's like learning to ride a bike with training wheels.
Yeah.
You can focus on the balance.
Right.
And then once you've got those basic skills down, you can move on to something more challenging.
Yeah, you wouldn't want to throw a student pilot into the cockpit of a 747 on their first day.
Right,
Just start somewhere. Okay, so speaking of complex aircraft, the handbook also talks about the FAA's role in aircraft certification. And it seems like there's a whole system in place to make sure those airplanes meet very rigorous safety standards,
Well, absolutely.
like before they ever even leave the ground.
Right, from the very beginning.
So where does that process start?
It starts with something called the Type Certificate Data Sheet, or TCDS.
The TCDS. Okay.
And that basically defines the design and performance characteristics of a particular airplane model.
Okay, so that ensures that all airplanes built to that design meet those specific standards,
Yeah.
from the materials they use to the performance of the engines.
Exactly, yeah. It covers everything. The dimensions, the weight limitations, engine performance, flight characteristics, even the equipment.
So it's like the DNA of the airplane.
Yeah, that's a good analogy.
It defines what it is and how it's supposed to perform.
Yeah,
Okay. And then once an airplane is built according to those specs, it has to be inspected to make sure it conforms to the TCDS.
right. That's where the airworthiness certificate
Yeah.
comes in.
Right, that little placard we talked about.
That's it. That's the FAA's stamp of approval
Okay.
saying that the airplane has been inspected and it meets the requirements of its type certificate.
And it's safe to fly.
You have to fly, yeah.
But what happens if a safety issue is discovered after an airplane has already been certified and is out there flying?
Well, that's where those airworthiness directives, the ADs, come in.
Right, like the safety bulletins we talked about earlier.
Exactly. So if there's a potential safety concern, the FAA issues an AD, and that requires specific inspections, repairs, modifications.
So it's like a way to address those issues and make sure those airplanes stay safe, even after they've been certified.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, that makes sense. So we've got all these regulations, these inspections, but the handbook really emphasizes the role of the flight instructor in shaping a new pilot's skills and judgment.
Oh, yeah. The flight instructor is crucial.
Right, they're the mentor, they guide the students,
Absolutely.
but we talked about the requirements they have to meet, the high standards.
Yeah.
But what are some of those intangible qualities that make a truly great flight instructor?
Well, beyond the technical expertise, being able to teach well, a great instructor has those qualities. You can't really teach.
Mm.
Patience, empathy, a genuine passion for flying and for sharing that passion.
So it's about finding someone who not only knows how to fly, but also knows how to teach, how to inspire, how to instill that love of aviation.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay. And the handbook mentions the syllabus as being a key tool in that learning process.
Oh, yeah, the syllabus is like a roadmap.
Okay.
Guides both the instructor and the student.
Okay.
Make sure that they cover everything in a logical, progressive way.
So it's not just a random collection of lessons.
Right.
It's structured, it's planned out.
Carefully crafted. Yeah.
Okay, so it sets clear expectations,
Yeah.
tracks the student's progress,
Right.
makes sure they're mastering each step before moving on,
Exactly.
and it incorporates different teaching methods.
It does, yeah. Ground instruction, flight simulations, dual flights, solo flights.
Right, so it's that mix of theory and practice that we were talking about.
It all comes together.
And for those who are looking for the best instructors out there, the handbook mentions the Gold Seal Flight Instructor Certificate and participation in the FAA Wings program.
Right. Those are good indicators.
Can you remind us what those are?
Sure. So the Gold Seal, that's awarded to instructors who consistently meet these high standards for instruction, professionalism, commitment to safety.
So that's like the gold standard for flight instructors?
You got it.
And the Wings program.
That's the continuing education program we talked about earlier.
Right, to keep pilots learning and growing.
Exactly. So, yeah, if you're looking for an instructor, those are good things to look for.
Good signs that they're invested in what they do.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, this has been a fascinating look at the world of airmanship and flight training.
Yeah, it's a lot to take in.
It is, but it's clear that it takes more than just being able to control the airplane.
Oh, yeah.
It's about understanding those deeper principles, developing that judgment, that airmanship.
It's the art of flying.
Exactly, and it starts with a solid foundation.
Yeah.
Good instruction, and that commitment to always learning.
Lifelong learning, for sure.
All right, we'll be back in just a moment to wrap up our deep dive into this fascinating world.
Stay with us.
We're back for the final part of our deep dive into this whole world of airmanship and flight training. And, as we've been going through the FAA's Airplane Flying Handbook, it's really striking how much it emphasizes not just the technical skills, but the right mindset that you need to be a truly competent pilot.
Yeah, it really drives home that aviation, it's not just about checklists and procedures.
Right.
There's this deeper level of, understanding and judgment
Yeah,
that's absolutely crucial for flying safely.
absolutely. And one thing that keeps coming up is this idea of good judgment. It seems like that's the thing that connects all the technical skills and knowledge.
It really is the glue that holds it all together.
Yeah. But how do they actually define good judgment, like in the context of flying? What does that mean?
Well, as you'll find in the handbook, good judgment. It's all about making sound decisions,
Okay.
and that's based on a solid understanding of the situation,
Hmm.
a clear assessment of the risks,
Okay.
and a real commitment to putting the safety first.
So it's not something you can just, learn from a book.
Yeah.
It's something that develops over time.
Yeah, with experience, with good training, and just always being willing to learn and adapt.
Okay. So good judgment, it's kind of like the culmination of all those airmanship skills we talked about.
Right. Coordination, timing, control, touch, speed sense.
And then combined with a deep understanding of the principles of flight.
Yeah, weather, navigation, aircraft systems, all of it.
It's a lot to juggle.
It is. It's about seeing the big picture, but also paying attention to the little details.
And the handbook talks a lot about risk management as being a big part of good judgment,
Yeah, crucial.
something that pilots should be doing all the time.
All the time, not just during pre-flight.
Right. So can you break that down a little bit?
Sure. Risk management, it's basically about identifying those potential hazards,
Okay.
figuring out how likely they are and how bad they could be,
Okay.
and then taking steps to, mitigate the risk.
Right.
It's an ongoing process.
Mm.
You're doing it from the moment you start planning the flight
Right.
all the way to when you shut down the engine back at the gate.
So it's not just about avoiding like obvious things like thunderstorms
Right.
or mountains.
Right.
It's about constantly being aware of those little things, those subtle cues that could be a problem.
Exactly. A good pilot is always thinking ahead, always asking what if, always planning for those contingencies.
Okay, so what's an example of that in practice?
Okay, let's say you're flying cross country and you hit some unexpected headwinds,
Okay.
stronger than what the forecast predicted.
Hmm.
Now, this could affect your fuel, right? You might have to divert to a different airport.
Right, that's a problem.
Yeah. So a pilot with good risk management skills is going to recognize that right away, and they're going to start thinking through their options. They're not just going to keep going and hope for the best.
Right, right.
They're going to be actively managing the risk, getting more information, and making informed decisions based on what's happening.
Okay, so it's about being proactive, not reactive.
Exactly. Staying one step ahead.
And judgment isn't just about those external factors like the weather or traffic.
Right.
It's also about, being aware of our own limitations.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like how our personal state can affect our decision-making in the cockpit.
Right. And you'll find this great tool in the handbook.
Okay.
It's called the MSAFE checklist.
MSAFE, yeah.
It helps pilots assess whether they're really fit to fly.
Okay, I remember that from my training, but refresh my memory. What does MSAFE stand for?
Okay, so it's illness, medication, stress, alcohol, fatigue, and emotion.
Okay, so it's making sure you're not sick, you're not on any medications that could affect your flying, you're
Yeah.
not stressed out, you haven't been drinking, you're not tired, and you're emotionally stable.
Exactly. It's about being honest with yourself,
Yeah.
recognizing your limits,
Mm.
and making responsible decisions based on how you're feeling.
It's a simple checklist, but it's a good reminder that we're human. Right. And we're not always at our best.
And those things can affect our decision-making up there.
Exactly. And you'll find another important part of good judgment is communication.
Oh, yeah. Communication is crucial.
Why is that so important?
Well, think about it. Communication is how pilots talk to air traffic control,
Right.
how they interact with other pilots,
Yeah.
how they maintain situational awareness.
Mm.
Clear communication. It prevents misunderstandings,
Yeah.
reduces errors,
Right,
makes
yeah.
sure everyone's on the same page.
Right, because even a small miscommunication could have huge consequences.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it goes beyond just speaking clearly. It's about listening carefully,
Mm.
asking questions if you need clarification,
Right.
making sure you understand what's being said.
So it's a two-way street.
It is. It takes effort from everyone involved.
Yeah. Okay, and in those multi-crew cockpits, it's even more important, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That's where you really need that teamwork, that shared understanding, that clear communication.
It's like they have to be in sync.
Yeah, like a well-choreographed dance.
Okay, so we've talked about risk management, personal assessment, communication, all these things that go into good judgment. But how does a pilot actually develop that sense, that intuition for what's safe and what's not?
It's a combination of things. But I would say it mainly comes from experience,
Okay.
a
Yeah.
deep understanding of how airplanes work,
Yeah,
and a commitment to always keep learning.
that's what the handbook says, right?
Yeah, a good pilot is always learning,
Hmm.
always striving to improve.
Never satisfied.
Never satisfied. There's always something more to learn.
So it's recognizing that safety isn't just a set of rules,
Right.
it's a way of thinking.
It's a mindset,
It's a commitment.
a way of life almost.
Yeah, it's that airmanship we've been talking about.
Exactly. And this deep dive into airmanship and flight training, it's been great.
It has. We've really uncovered so much about the skills, the regulations, the equipment, the human factors.
All the things that make aviation work.
Yeah. And the Airplane Flying Handbook, it's a fantastic resource for anyone who wants to learn more.
It is. Gives you that solid foundation.
Yeah. So if you're thinking about taking to the skies, I highly recommend checking it out.
Yeah, it's on the FAA website.
Okay, and if you're already a pilot, remember, the learning never stops.
Never stops.
The FAA Wings program, that's a great way to keep learning and stay sharp.
Yeah, keep those skills current.
So, airmanship, it's a journey, not a destination.
That's it.
Keep learning, keep striving for excellence, and always put safety first. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.